Dear God, we thank you for this opportunity and time that you've given us as your people in these last days, these final moments, Lord, that we may come and withdraw and review, dear God, the messages that you've given through your messenger, that we as your people may foundate ourselves on. We ask thee, Lord, for clarification. We ask thee for clarity. And we ask thee also, Lord, for understanding of the message that has been given. Especially on the subject of LGBTQ, homosexuality, and gay marriage, Lord. Be with me as I speak, and things that I've studied, Lord, that you may bring into remembrance, and also may you help me, Lord, that may be delivered according to your will, and that it may be clear to your people. Lord, please be with us in this hour. May you bless each and every one of us and help us to understand your word. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hopefully, you could see my board. I'm going to be reviewing Elder Tess' presentation on the 28th of August 2021. This is around the time period when the message was formalized. This is the time period where in the priest line, where the message was being developed and was formalizing in 2021. And this is the camp meeting that she had, and it was a series of presentations that she did, that Elder Tess did, focusing and on this issue of LGBTQ, gay marriage and homosexuality. In this series of presentations, there are a few more. There was some before before my presentation. I think one Tokasa did last 2 weeks ago, last fortnight ago, and this is just a build-up on to what was presented by Tokasa, and also there are a few other presentations in between, which I also will encourage each and every one of us to go and watch them in connection to this presentation. The heading, as you see, is Cana, and this is the story of Christ's first miracle that he performed in Cana, and it is, and we know that Cana is surrounding the subject of marriage. Okay, it was the marriage function or marriage reception or that happened that Christ attended to, where he performed his first miracle. So as I was thinking about the topic that was selected, and I saw and I see how it's related to marriage, and how the whole of her presentation in this subject was on gay marriage and homosexuality, or same-sex marriage, or relationships. So with that in mind, I would like us to discuss a few things, and hopefully that we will have a discussion, and also as I present and go on, we will look through the Bible verses that's always used for the defense, or as Protestants, I can say Adventism always use, Christianity always used to go against gay marriage and homosexuality. As you can see, these are all the Bible verses, the Old Testament and New Testament, in defense of anti-gay marriage and homosexuality. These are the Bible verses, and we're going to just briefly discuss them, and to see whether the arguments that have been shared or given, is it valid? Is it actually about gay marriage and homosexuality that the Bible is speaking about. And then we're going to go back into history, a little bit of history, in going back to these Bible verses, and we're going to look at the context, the setting, under what nation, superpower at that very moment is in control, or is the superpower, to understand the context so that we could understand exactly what the Bible verses is speaking about. And I know that this is exactly, I think it was Brandon's, one of Brandon's presentation, I think is where he spoke about the 90% and the 10%, which we use in order to discuss or study using the parable methodology. 90%, as you can see, is most of our time in order to, before we can make an application, which is the 10%, we need to go and search and get all the information we can get about the history or the context. I know Tokasa reviewed that, and she opened up with that last fortnight ago, on the importance of we not forgetting our past history, and how we are to go back to history in order to understand what, if we're taking a Bible verse, what the Bible verse is saying, and also to look at Ellen G. White's writings. So basically, that's exactly what we're going to go through today, and hopefully that I will do justice when we go forward and we discuss all these issues. And also, I would, as I reviewed, I will share some of things that I personally have seen. Is something that God really hates so much that it ends up him visiting, in the sense, in Sodom and Gomorrah's cases, or punishing or destroying that nation. And what was one of the main important reasons why God had to destroy that nation. So that's basically the overview of what I'm going to do, and hopefully that we would understand, and it would help us to understand the issue of gay marriage and homosexuality and why the movement supports that. First of all, a question that I would like to phrase and put: what do we understand by the word marriage? What is marriage here in this context? Can someone, because it's Cana headed, can someone, just few people, just give their thoughts or ideas what marriage is all about, or so that when we go through these Bible verses, we would understand. The reason why I'm asking this question, so that as we go through these Bible verses, we can understand that at that moment where the context of these Bible verses, it was never in their minds about marriage or gay marriage. Never in their minds was homosexuality was in their minds. They never thought of these things. So before we go through the Bible verses, it's rather better for you and I to really understand what not the in-depth understanding, but just what we get, what gay marriage is all about, what marriage is all about, and then try and define homosexuality, so that we could understand what it is before we go and read these Bible verses and understand the history or the nation that is the superpower at that very moment, and the practices that they do. And when we compare that with the definition of gay marriage and homosexuality, we could see that most of these Bible verses that Protestant Christianity, Protestantism, and SDA use in order to go against homosexuality and gay marriage, they taking it off context. So can someone, at least 2-3 people, give their understanding of what they think gay marriage is all about? I'll open up the floor if
George,
yes.
it's Harry speaking from Queensland.
Go ahead.
Marriage. I understand marriage from a simple perspective. It's sacred. It's a
Sacred,
it's a
right?
sacred bond between two people.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Union of two people, or a bond, sacred bond, or union between two people? Yes. Thank you, Rosie. Anyone else? It's a relationship just mentioned by Hosea from Wendina. Okay. Relationship between two people. Anything else?
Hello, George.
Yes.
It's Lynn here, also from Queensland. I'm just, I was going to say it's a commitment between two people. And I suppose from a Christian perspective, we perceive it as before God. But generally speaking, I think a commitment between two adults, basically.
Thank you so much. So a commitment between two people, they commit into caring for one another. Is that right? Looking after one another.
I think, yes, they can. Yeah, I think from a Christian perspective, we've viewed it as they become one, as in they're committing their lives to work together. Well, usually it's for life, but I guess everybody might change their vows to suit their perspective. But generally, we've understood it to be a commitment for life to join together and work as one through life.
Thank you. Thank you so
George,
much.
can I just say?
Yes, Molly.
I believe marriage is a choice between two people to come together and unite in a relationship based on their attraction and feeling toward each other.
Thank you.
How
Thank
about
you. Lifetime companionship.
just one word?
So, yeah, continue.
Legalized usually. In order for it to be a marriage today, it's
Okay, legalize. All very good definitions on what marriage is and our understanding what marriage is. It's the sacred bond between two people, relationship, attraction and feelings. It is where you can share your feelings, your love, your care for the other person, your counterpart, your commitment into caring, loving, and everything. So basically, if I have to summarize this, and also one thing that I need to elaborate here and also share with us, it's an agreement between two people, an agreement between two people where they both agree to go into this bonding or relationship or commitment in becoming a counterpart. So there's no one that's forced into doing this. That's something that we need to also understand with marriage. It's an agreement between two people where they with their feelings and attraction towards the other, and also their commitment. They want to make a lifetime commitment to caring and doing everything they can for their partner. So basically, that's what marriage is. And keep these thoughts into your mind, because as we're going to go into these Bible verses, you will really see why what's happening in these Bible verses has nothing to do with marriage. It has nothing to do with homosexuality. Okay, now that's marriage. How about homosexuality?
George, can I interrupt,
Yes,
please? I'm just gonna throw
sure.
a curveball. How about when we say it's an agreement, but today there are marriages where you don't agree, but you are pushed into it and it's legalized. In other words, the
Yes.
culture dictates that you be married to so and so, even though you don't want to be married to this person. It's legalized, and that's a marriage in their eyes.
Thank you. In certain places, that's exactly what's happening. People are forced into those marriages due to customs, traditions, maybe family relationships, and etc. And then there's some things. Basically, what I want us to understand, which is what was just said, is true. What I want us to understand, the underlying principle or things that we understand what marriage is all about is this. It's a bond. It's supposed to be an agreement between two people who have committed and are willing to commit to love and care and do things together with their partner. But there are also, as just mentioned, places where people are just forced due to family, due to situations or traditions, and etc. Basically, what marriage is all about is just how you express your feelings, your love and care towards the person that you're going to commit, a lifetime commitment, make a commitment and make it legalized, which comes in every aspect. Have a right to do, have a right to things in the legalized law as the government views things. Now, homosexuality. What is homosexuality? Can someone? I'm not sure. I'm trying to share. Okay. Okay, let me just. Okay, can someone read the first the definition of what homosexuality is?
I could read if you'd like. Oh, go ahead if someone else was going to. I'm
No,
happy to
Lynn,
let you read.
you do it.
Okay. Homosexuality is a sexual attraction, romantic attraction, and sexual behavior between members of the same sex or gender. As a sexual orientation, homosexuality is an enduring pattern of emotional, romantic, and/or sexual attractions exclusively to people of the same sex or gender. It also refers to a person's sense of identity based on those attractions, related behaviors, and membership in a community of others who share those attractions.
Thank you so much for that. So, if you have to just summarize that, what homosexuality, the definition of homosexuality is, could you just give it in probably a sentence or probably a word, if you're able to? What is basically, do you see what homosexuality is about? How is it defined?
I would probably say those who are attracted to the same gender as their own gender, so same gender attraction and
Same gender
romantically
attraction?
attracted. Yeah, sexually attracted to the same gender.
Thank you. So basically, for me to just think, basically, there's a connection there. Eh? If you could say that, basically, there's a connection. There's always like both parties will have an agreement, or they like each other. They express their feelings towards one another. It's not something that how they express themselves. As it says here, their sexual orientation, their pattern of emotional, romantic, and sexual attraction exclusively to people of the same sex. Eh? So instead of like having your emotions or feelings or attraction towards the opposite sex, you have it towards the same concept. You having it towards the same sex. Yeah? So basically, this is something that people it's like a kind of relationship, as I say, as we just mentioned. So, and also an agreement, or I can say, like both parties, they agree to go into this, come to consensual, to go into this relationship or homosexual attraction, and they express it towards one another. I'll just stop screening there. So with those two definitions, one thing I see that's common here is how you, with gay marriage and homosexuality, is how you express your feelings. It's something that has an attraction. It's something that basically, if simply, I may be corrected, is something that you like doing. It's not like it's how you feel. It's something that what's the better word to use? But I hope that you get what my point is. Yeah. So it's not something that which you can just force towards one another, or something that. Okay, but let's continue. So that's exactly what gay marriage and homosexuality is. A matter of fact, if I go back to the share screen, the word homosexuality was not even in the word homosexuality was not even in the minds in this history, in this time period between Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Rome, when these Bible verses were written. It wasn't even used at that time. In matter of fact, while doing these things, they nothing to do with relationship, or nothing to do with the attraction towards that. It's tradition. It's something that they have to go through in order to achieve something at the end. Eh? It's something that maybe most time people are being forced to go through. Eh? Okay. Can someone read this part, the history on LGBTQ? Yeah, I will read it for us. Some scholars argue that the term homosexuality is problematic when applied to ancient cultures, since, for example, neither Greeks or Romans, that's mostly of what the time period for the New Testament and Old Testament also, Romans possess any one word covering the same semantic reigns as the modern concept of homosexuality, nor did there exist a distinction of lifestyle or differentiation of psychological or behavioral profiles in the ancient world. However, there are diverse sexual practices that varied in acceptance depending on the time and place. In ancient Greece, the pattern of adolescents, boys engaging in sexual practices with older males, which we know is pederasty, older males did not constitute a homosexual identity in the modern sense, since such relationships were seen as phases in life, not permanent orientations, since later on the younger partner would commonly marry females and reproduce. Other scholars argue that there are significant continuities between ancient and modern sexuality. So I will, just to briefly explain what it says there, the word homosexuality cannot be related, or you cannot use that of what the practices of ancient ancient world was, or the thoughts or the practices that they practice, the sexual practices. It has in the definition of what homosexuality that we just went through, and we define what homosexuality is: the attraction or the relationship between two people of the same sex. With that definitions, you will see that it has nothing. When we go back through history, the Greece time period, how the Greece usually train the younger males to become better, good leaders later. And the process that they go through was pederasty, was a relationship between an older man and a younger man. Basically, these are adolescents. These are males, the young males that's probably 13 years old and above, between 13 to 25, and they have this relationship. Not, I wouldn't say relationship, sorry for that word. They have this practice, they do these practices because there's no emotional or anything that's deal with it. They just have to go through this process or these practices in order to train them and make them become what can I say, a dominion, I can say a superior male when they grow, so that they wouldn't to have domain or dominion over other people. So basically what these practices do was just a training, because it says at the end of their training, the years, they go and get married to females, to women, a lady, a woman, and also they go and they begin to reproduce. And as time goes by, these individuals, this young man who gets married, he's going to become an older man, and then these practices kept on rotating as time in history as time goes by. So the word homosexuality, I think it started around the 1800s or 1800s, where this word started being used or recognized or used by people in history. So in that time, the word homosexuality and what the definition it is, or definition that we have now of what homosexuality is and gay marriage is, we see that this was something that was not in the minds of in the ancient world. In matter of fact, this is something that they will totally disagree with, something that they will hate with a perfect hatred. The mentality or the concept of two people of the same sex being together. Because if you look closely, the concept of what the olden days was and what they were trying to share, or the basic underlying concept or main thing that they were doing in those practices that they were doing, the relationship between two males, especially males, is the main concept was this. Okay, I can say the concept of dominionism and also abuse, because they have the mindset that the male is the superior human being, and the woman is an inferior. So in the context of those, when they had that relationship, those practice, not, forgive me for using the word relationship, the practices that they use, the main concept, the principle that's behind those practices is this: for them to become the act. Thank you. The act that they did was just to show that, to teach them how they need to become a dominion, and not be a submissive, for them to be superior and not inferior, for them to be a leader, a great leader, and not be led, where they need to be the penetrator, manly, and not to be penetrated, how they need to be active and not passive. So this is basically in order to become a better man in life. So that's basically how they can do this, have these characteristics, develop these characteristics, and this is exactly what's behind these practices, to teach them this concept. In matter of fact, we can just put one word in there: to become a better patriarch, to be a better patriarch, in other sense, patriarchy. So you could see those are the concepts that they were in. So in this context, in ancient Greece, this is some presentations of Elder Tess before this presentation. So I encourage you to please go and watch those presentations in order to understand completely what she went back through into history, the history of Greece, the history of Rome, and what the practices that they did, that we just read from Wikipedia, and what's behind those practices. The backbone of homophobia is exactly this concept. Okay, the backbone of homophobia for the ancient world is this. This is why, if someone was a homosexual or did this gay marriage concept in the ancient world, they would be feared, they would be pushed, they would be persecuted, just because of this concept. It will show a sign of weakness to a male who has this kind of relationship, because of this concept, the dominionism and abuse, the act that they're doing. Okay, so with that understanding of the concept of this history and of the ancient world, if you're going to see, if you go back into Eden, you will see Eden. Then we have the issue of gender, worship, and race. And then we come to Abraham. I've marked Abraham here because Abraham was in the time period where Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. Okay, that's why I marked Abraham here, and that was around 1897 BC. That was why I did this. Okay, then we have ancient Israel, the Alpha of ancient Israel, where Moses' time period is, and we understand that Moses is the writer or the author of Genesis, okay, and also Leviticus. Okay, is the author of Genesis and Leviticus. So basically, we need to also understand, when we read these things, we need to understand it's written by Moses, and he's in the time period where Egypt and Assyria, especially Egypt, was in and is the world superpower at that very moment. So we will see that these practices of having the same sex and the sexual practices, the act that they do, was also something that Egypt also were doing. So we need to keep these things in mind as we read these things. And First Kings and Second Kings, Leviticus, it's in the time period where Babylon was in existence. And also we need to understand Babylon is the world superpower, which is followed by Greece. And we understand that all these practices were practiced by these superpowers just because of this concept of dominionism, to showing control over someone else, which we basically say is patriarchal, is patriarchy, having a dominion over someone else. Okay, and showing the dominionism manly characteristics to someone else. Okay, now we need to understand these Bible verses. So when we go to Genesis 19, 1 to 11, it talks about Sodom and Gomorrah, the issue of Sodom and Gomorrah, and exactly what happened. One thing we need to keep in mind when we read Genesis 19, 1 to 11, as many of these, what happened in Genesis 19, you will see it's something that just happened that very day. Something that happened that very day when they entered and they wanted to come in and do something. And no, the word no means to have sexual, have sex with the two and do what they usually do to other visitors that enters. So basically what I want us to understand, first of all, is this Bible verse is just a one-day thing, and they entered and they wanted to do that to those two, and we know and understand that homosexuality and marriage, it takes time to have that relationship between two people, to know that person very well, and all those things that we need to keep in mind when we're doing this, when we're referring to these Bible verses, because what homosexuality and gay marriage is all about and how we define it, and it's a relationship between two, and relationship does not just develop overnight, and it's something that takes a period of time to get to know the other person, and as we know the word to fall in love with another person, it takes time. Okay, and this is exactly what gay marriage and homosexuality is. But when we go to Genesis, it's just a one-day event, maybe 1 or 2 nights event, and it's something that if people want to use homosexuality and gay marriage to use this Bible verse, first and foremost, the definition of gay marriage and homosexuality really goes against what literally happened in that day. And also, we need to understand, let's go to Ezekiel 16. Ezekiel 16. Let's go to Ezekiel 16. Can someone read Ezekiel 16, verse 49 to 50?
Jungle Jimbo.
Ezekiel 16. Let's go to 48 to 50. This is a Bible verse that we usually to show what was the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. Right? Okay, now let's continue. Can someone read that quickly, please?
I could read it. Ezekiel 16, sorry, which verse
Yes,
again?
48, verse 48 to verse 50.
Verse 48 to verse 50. Okay, so, as I live, saith the Lord God, Sodom thy sister hath not done, she nor her daughters, as thou hast done, thou and thy daughters. Behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom, pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness was in her, and in her daughters, neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. And they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Therefore I took them away as I saw good.
Okay, we understand that Ezekiel is in time period where they were taken into captivity, into Babylon. And the reason why they were taken into captivity, why the Jerusalem was to be destroyed, was destroyed in this context, was because of what they were doing, and their practices were the same practices that what Sodom and Gomorrah was doing in this context, as Ezekiel is sharing, is writing, and exactly what Sodom and Gomorrah was doing. In this context, it says that you also are doing, Jerusalem or Judah at that time. Okay, so we would understand what were they doing. Basically, their sin is basically the sin of abuse, and how they've mistreated people. And it's interesting, with something that I will share later in my presentation. It's interesting that with those abuses, and people are hurt. People are hurt. The things that has been done to them are being forced to them. It's something not consensus, and you know, and that's exactly the mistreatment of people, the inequality that was in that time period. That was the abuse. The abuse was the sin that I personally think, from reading and studying this, is exactly the sin that God hates. That I could say the cries of people. If you read closely, it says the cries of people. If you go back to Genesis chapter 18, before that, it says, I've heard the cry of people, and the cries have come into heaven. And this is what I'm coming to investigate. That cry said to Abraham. And it's those cries of people, they've been abused, that reach unto heaven, which God hears. And then that's exactly why he has destroyed these things. And those same practices that they were doing, okay, those same practices that this ancient ruling world at that moment were doing, Sodom and Gomorrah and other ancient world superpowers were doing at that moment, God warned Israel not to do. I will say basically this abusive, patriarchal, abusive practices that they do, as I just mentioned about pederasty and other practice that they do to show dominionism to other races. Or when we come down to Rome, we also see how, for pleasure, for entertainment, they also do this male prostitution, having sex with them, and all these practices that they were doing, which is in the context of the New Testament. Okay, so abuse is one of the sins that God really hated. I will ask if sorry, I don't have my Ellen G. White yet downloaded in my laptop, and I couldn't highlight it. So I'll ask if Yambaki can, I've asked Yambaki if she can help me with just reading out the Bible, the quotation of Ellen G. White is TSB 126, TSB 126, page 126. Okay. Before she reads that, I just want to share a little bit of the context of this Bible. This is a minister, an Adventist minister who is married, okay, who is a Bible teacher, and what he was doing, he was, I could say that he was abusing a children. Okay, so just keep the thing, and this is exactly what Ellen G. White has mentioned to state in 126 of what he has done and how she views that, and she compares that to Sodom and Gomorrah, right? The sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. Can ask Yambaki, can unmute and read the quotation, please?
SB 126, paragraph 1 and 2. Looking unto Jesus, who is the author and finisher of your faith, you will be of good courage in the Lord. We cannot but know that the end of all things is at hand. I come to you as a physician of souls. I tell you that it is not possible for you to act as a minister. What are you doing? Leading young women to the tree of knowledge of evil practices and teaching them to pluck the fruit, which is only evil. This is doing Satan's work more effectually. It is poisoning minds and filling them with unholy imaginings. These are the very sins which corrupted Sodom. Their evil practices did not come all at once. First, one man and woman stupefied themselves by unholy, polluted habits. Then, as inhabitants settled into Sodom, they did as you are doing, educating others in a line that is forbidden of God. And so as the inhabitants continued to multiply, these ministers of sin continued in educating them in their own defiling practices, until if any person came into their midst, their first thoughts were to educate them in the evil work, until Sodom became renowned for its pollutions. Their sins reached unto heaven, and the Lord would bear with them no longer. He destroyed them and all that was beautiful, that made it as a second Eden, for the earth was defiled under the inhabitants thereof.
Thank you so much, Yambaki. So I would the practices that he was practicing and things that he was teaching was basically in a form of abuse that was happening, and how this minister was doing this, and how Ellen G. White just connects that to all the practices that were done to Sodom and Gomorrah, in Sodom and Gomorrah, sorry. So that's the reason why God had destroyed, was because of those abusive practices that they were doing to others, and so we could see that it has nothing with Sodom and Gomorrah. It has nothing to deal with the what homosexuality is and gay marriage. Contextually, okay, what they were doing, it was like something to do with this concept of dominionism. Okay, those are the practices just to show their power, or their more superior, or their more dominion to whoever they are doing the practice upon. So it has completely different concept from what gay marriage and homosexuality and the definition of what it is to this woman. That's why they are doing injustice. The Protestants, those who use these Bible verses, are doing injustice to the verse without understanding the history and of the nation that is in ruling power and the practice that they do. And those are the practices, the abusive practices that that the other nations are doing. Those are the things that God is warning Israel not to do. Okay, but as we read in Ezekiel, his people were doing the same things, were practicing. They were very abusive things, that they were in inequality, that practices that was happening, and people are also crying. Okay, so those are things. So if we take that Genesis 19:1 to 14, if you go into the other Bible verses, Judges 19:16 and 24. If you can go to Judges 19:16 and 24 quickly. No, my time is catching up with me. Can someone go there quickly? Judges 19, 16 and 24.
Use it.
And can someone
Hello, George.
hello?
It's Marilyn from Wordy Bully.
Hello, Marilyn. Go ahead.
Okay. And behold, there came an old man from his work out of the field at even, which was also of Mount Ephraim, and he sojourned in Gibeah. But the men of the place were Benjamites. And when he had lifted up his eyes, he saw a wayfaring man in the street of the city. And the old man said, Whither goest thou? And whence comest thou? And he said unto him, We are passing from Bethlehem, Judah, toward the side of Mount Ephraim. From thence am I. And I went to Bethlehem, Judah, but I am now going to the house of the Lord, and there is no man that receiveth me to house. Yet there is both straw and provider for our asses, and there is bread and wine also for me, and for the handmaid, and for the young man which is with thy servants, there is no want of anything. And the old man said, Peace be with thee. Howsoever, let all thy wants lie upon me, only lodge not in the street. So he brought him into his house and gave provider unto the asses, and they washed their feet and did eat and drink. Now as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial, beset the house round about, and beat at the door, and spake to the master of the house, the old man, saying, Bring forth the man that came into thine house, that we may know him. And the man, the master of the house, went out unto them and said unto them, Nay, my brethren, nay, I pray you, do not so wickedly. See that this man is come into mine house. Do not this folly. Behold, here is my daughter, a maiden, and his concubine. Them I will bring out now, and humble ye them, and do with them what seemeth good unto you. But unto this man do not so vile a thing.
Thank you so much. So we could see the similarities to what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah and the practices they did. And then the sad thing is they offered the woman, the concubine, and what they did to them was really saddening. How they abused her, the word abused also is used. If you go further down to verse 25, they abused her all night. And then she was just left. And that's really saddening to read and see how woman was valued at that time. And how this man also at the time of Lot, where they valued the man, their visitor, more than their daughters, more than the woman that's within. So it just shows us the mentality and how the Bible in the Old Testament was written with this concept in mind. Okay, with this concept in mind, male having dominion over male, or is much more worthy, I can say, or much more better than or worthy compared to woman. We could see the story here. If you go to so the same practices, it's all about abuse. Okay, it's all about abuse. here, same practices that happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, same thing they did here. If you go into Kings, 1 Kings 14:24, 15:12, you can write this down at your own time, you can read it. And also go to 2 Kings 23:7. It keeps referring back to Sodom and what the sin of Sodom. So we could cross that out, because since Sodom has nothing to do with gay marriage and homosexuality, and the practices that they did was abusive, how they were going through this concept of dominionism and how they demonstrate that through those acts and those practices. So we cross these things up. It comes down to Leviticus 18:22 and 20 and 13. And we, it's just in Leviticus 18:22 and 20 and 13, it's just a warning on how God was, through Moses, was warning the Israelites that they should not do the practices of the nations that's surrounding them, the nations that he overthrew, that he destroyed, in order for the Israelites to do. So he says, don't do what they do. Okay, and the concept, if you read Leviticus 18:22 and 20 and 13, was, if you read it carefully, it is talking about how they had sexual relationship, man to man, woman to woman, and we not relationship, sorry, the acts, the practices that they do, and we understand from history that it has nothing to do with relationships. It has nothing to do with gay marriage and homosexuality. And these are the Bible verses that was in Leviticus 18:22 to 20 and 20 and 13. So we could cross all those out, because this time period is exactly where from Moses all the way down to Babylon and Greece, time period. Okay, that's ancient Israel, and we could say it's the alpha of ancient Israel, and this is exactly the ruling powers that was at that time, and the practices that they were practicing were practices of having same-sex practices, the doing things to them. It has nothing to deal with or to do with relationship or having feelings or relationship. Most of the acts that they do are being forced or done to someone that the other person is not accepting, the other person hates, or I can say at the end they feel abused. And those cries that, they silently cry, those cries have been heard by God. And that's exactly why he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah and other nations around them. Okay, as we come to the New Testament with 1 Timothy 1:9 to 11 and Jude 1:7, so Jude 1:7 is just referring to Sodom and Gomorrah. So we've dealt with that. So that's why I can just cross that off, because of the concept or what the context is in Genesis 19. So we can just take that off because contextually it's just not about gay marriage or homosexuality. We go to 1 Timothy 1:9 to 11. Can someone read that? 1 Timothy 1:9 to 11. I think I have only a few minutes left to close, so I'll just begin to conclude now. Can someone go quickly to 1 Timothy 1:9 to 11?
1 Timothy 1:9 to 11. Knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man, but for the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly and for sinners, for unholy and profane, for murderers of fathers and murderers of mothers, for manslayers, for warmongers, for them that defile themselves with mankind, or man-stealers, for liars, for perjured persons, and if there be any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine, according to the glorious gospel of the blessed God, which was committed to my trust. 11.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Okay, that ends my reading.
Okay. So basically, it's just doing the practices that was happening, and what God considers as what God considers as an abomination in a sense, something that God does not approve of. And with First Timothy, under what relation, what superpower was First Timothy written in the context? Which
Wrong.
time period? Rome.
Wrong.
Okay, Rome. Thank you. Rome. What was the practices of Rome at that time? Remember, please just think about what we're speaking about, and it's all about same-sex, gay marriage and homosexuality. So when I say practices at that time, I'm focusing on sex between a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. The practices. What were they doing?
Yeah,
Wrong.
was homosexual was not an issue.
Homosexual was not, because we've already defined what homosexual is,
Yeah.
and it has nothing to do what they were doing then. The homosexuality is in your attraction, your feelings, your emotions towards someone. That's why I wanted us to define this first, so that when we thank you. So when we go through all the history and we see what they were doing, it has nothing to do with gay marriage and homosexuality. This is exactly what we are trying to do with all these Bible verses. Pederasty, relationship. Okay. Most of the things that Rome did, they usually have these big arenas, or they always have their parties, and also they have slaves. And they always use slaves to entertain themselves. This is exactly what Rome is all about. Nearly all the movies you will see, or history books you read, you will see that in Rome they always have slaves, and they do slave trades, and they use slaves to entertain themselves. So through that, they male prostitutions, okay, slave. They make them have sex with one another as an entertainment to these Roman leaders, these Roman those are the practices that they were doing, and this is exactly what what God was trying to tell through his writers, through Timothy, that these are the practices that they are doing, the abusive thing. I was thinking about what abuse is. Abuse is when you do something to someone that's who does not like or hates, or it's something that's, the other person that's been performed, the abuse has been performed to, it hurts, it's something that they've been forced into. They do not agree to do those things. So no form of abuse is okay with God. And we need to understand that. And so I hope you get that. That's why I be able to, like, there's no I can say there's no case that the Protestants and SDA, the Bible verses that they always use, there's no case that they can use these Bible verses to go against gay marriage and homosexuality. Okay? Two people of the same sex having a relationship, a loving, caring, agreeable, agreed to consensus relationship between two people, how they express their love towards one another, for another person of the same sex. So that's exactly what gay marriage and homosexuality is, and how it's been defined. But when we look at these practices, there's nothing of that sort is seen, and that's why we cannot say gay marriage and homosexuality is wrong, because these are the Bible verses that supports it. Okay, so then we come to Romans 1:18, And 1 Corinthians 6:9, we come to Paul, our favorite, I could say, how could I say, our favorite Bible writer who a lot of things that he writes, our movement does not agree with it. For example, Ephesians 5, wives submit unto your husband. Slave, obey your masters. These are some things that we as a movement now, we tell Paul, no, I'm sorry. You can delete that chapter away, that verses away, please. It does not apply now. Okay, so most of the time, most of the Bibles, he's the only author. Paul is the only author in the Bible that things that he does and he says, when he uses Ephesians 5, when he sees Ephesians 5, he uses man is the head of the wife, and then he says man over the wife. Then he used Christ, just as Christ is the head of the church. Okay, what has he done here? What has he done here? What Paul has done here is exactly this. He has structured, okay, he had made it right and permanent by using Christ as an illustration to the church. And what he has done, he has made it structured, he has made it right, and he has made it permanent. Therefore, we'll see, that's why when people use that Bible verse and to support patriarchy, see, this is because Christ is the head, and they start using these Bible verses, which I personally believe that if you read carefully what the Bible verse means, it doesn't really exactly mean that thing. But people take that and they make it permanent. They said, see, this is God's order. Man needs to be the head and woman needs to be the tail. Which is not the concept that we believe. So we did that with Ephesians 5. We did that in this movement, we did the same thing with Deuteronomy 22. Go back here to Moses' time period. Okay, go back to Moses' time period. We did the same with Deuteronomy 22 when he spoke about the pants and etc. So in that sense, we ignored. We say that what Paul has written is not right. What Moses has written is not right. We believe that, we accepted Deuteronomy 22, we accepted that Moses was wrong. In 2019, we accepted that Paul was wrong in Ephesians 5. And we believed in equality because the line tells us that we are in the gender equality time period. The structure has told us those things. And what we did, we ignored Paul. This is not something, because people always use thus says the Lord. And ignoring, or I can say deleting one passage from the Bible, this is not something that only we in this movement did. Let me just go back into the Millerites time period. What did they put away? What did they go against Paul? Because Paul mentioned that slaves need to go back to their masters and obey their masters. So in other sense, Paul supports slavery. And with that Bible verses, and not only Paul, go back to Abraham, Moses, the Old Testament, all supports this. And this is exactly what the Protestant did. They used a thus says the Lord to support them, supporting slavery and allowing slavery to happen. They said, because thus says the Lord, the Bible says this. And what Ellen G. White did, who's the messenger of that time, who understood the present truth message of that time, said in her writings, no, Paul, you're wrong. Slavery is not allowed. God does not like slavery. No. Servants, you don't go back to your master and obey your master. Slavery is out. So what Ellen G. White did, she said, ignore Paul. What Paul wrote in that. Not only Ellen G. White in this temple, let's go back to Christ time period. Paul himself did the same thing. Moses wrote that all who wants to join Israel needs to be circumcised. What Paul said. Matter of fact, Peter, this is what the argument that they were going through in that history. Peter and the other disciples, they will say, no, they need to be circumcised in order to become part of God's kingdom. What Paul said, through him understanding the present truth message of his time, what he said, no. So what did Paul do? He ignored the writings of Moses. So that's two weaknesses for us. It's giving us the license that we, as members of this movement, we can also do the same thing when with verses that does not go with what the present truth message, as the structure has just said, what the present truth message has done, given to us. That gives us the license to do that. Even Christ himself, because Moses was saying, whoever does sin, stone them, stone them. Christ said, no. Kill them. What did Christ say? No, you can't stone them. Don't stone them. So even Christ himself did the same thing. So this is something, nothing new. That's why in these presentations, the emphasis was on going back to history, and then before we can make an application, because 90% of our study, our information, our facts comes from history, and what history will do and show us is exactly what needs to be applied in this time period. So we can ignore this. But if you go into the context of this, Paul is in the time period of Rome, and you know what the Romans are doing. And it's the abusive thing, the abuse that they've been doing over and over and over again. As a matter of fact, for me to conclude, you know, one thing I've noticed when I've read Sodom and Gomorrah, the cry went up to heaven, reached heaven. God heard those cries. What cry? Is the cry of the abused. That cry, God does not like hearing. He visited Sodom and Gomorrah. The same cry and the bloodshed Israel, Judah was doing, God's people. That's why he destroyed Jerusalem. Not only that, he destroyed Egypt, allowed the pestilence and everything to go into there because of the cries of his people unto him. They've been abused, been in bondage for all those time. They cried and God heard their cry. All the other aspect we'll see. So one thing that I've seen with all those examples of destruction and the reasons why God destroyed them, every of those contexts I read, I see what I personally viewed was that it is the cry of the abused that reached down to heaven, where God took action. And this is my view, and I can be corrected. But if you go to Revelation chapter 18, I see the same concept there, the principle. Because, can we go to Revelation 18? Babylon is fallen, is fallen. That's a concept of what we think, and how Babylon is going to be destroyed. Okay, modern Babylon. Verse 4, we understand that when the loud cry has been given, come out of her, my people. But I just want to read this in order for us to just see why God destroys Babylon. Parabolically, So it says, verse 4, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues, or things that's going to be done to her. So the plagues is a result of her sins. What is her sins? What is this sins that has reached unto heaven? It says, verse 5, for her sins have reached unto heaven. Go back to all the other histories. The sin that I saw through all those destruction that went up to heaven was abuse, patriarchy, people being mistreated. And that's something that God hears, and he hears the cries of people. And it says, her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities, things that she has been done throughout her. Verse 6, reward her even as she rewarded you. Double unto her double, according to her works. In the cup with which she hath filled, fill to her double. Verse 7, how much she had glorified herself. Okay, she lifted herself up. So if she lifted herself up, obviously, contrast, there would be people that's down below, which she would push down. Okay, glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her, for she had
Sorry to
in her
interrupt
heart.
you, George, but can you just replace she with it?
Okay, sorry, Elder. Okay.
You're right. I know you know that.
Okay. Reward it even as it rewarded you, and double unto it double, according to its work. In the cup which it hath filled, fill to it double. How much it hath glorified itself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give it, for it said in its heart, I sit as a queen or a king. But when we understand, when a queen is there or a king is there, what do we have? These are like hidden information. What do we have? If you sit as a queen, as a king, as a ruler, what do you have? Remember the context of John, Rome. So they have kings and they have
servants,
slaves. Okay, I sit as a queen and am no widow and shall see no sorrow. So, matter of fact, she says, torment her and sorrow given unto her. So that means she's been causing a lot of pain and sorrow. She's been I can sum it up into one word. She has been abusing people. And this abuse and the cries of humanity, the cries of the minority, those that have been abused, the LGBTQ, the woman, children, because of patriarchy, the the physical ones abuse, the mental ones, the emotional ones. And people are crying. These are the cries that reach unto heaven. And that's the reason why God is going to destroy Babylon. And we see this model of dominionism and abuse is going to abuse is going to happen. Matter of fact, papacy, an example, and what papacy did in the 1260 time of persecution. And exactly as we see this, we see that in these last days, the sin that will cause God to act is the sin of abuse. And I thank God that this movement does not tolerate abuse in any way. And I thank God for the message. And if we have been performing these abuses in a way and you don't know, you and I have to pray that God will show us, that you and I may do the right thing. So members, I just quote what Elder Tess said as she concludes her presentation. She puts it this way: gender encompasses the LGBTQ rights. So when we talk about gender, we also need to contact this. There were three movements that will happen just prior to when our reform line begins. And it was the civil rights, it was the second wave feminism, and it's the Stonewall. And these three movements, they were all pushing for the rights of individuals, especially those that has been suppressed, the minorities. Okay, and she says, LGBTQ, listen carefully, needs to be welcomed in the movement with understanding and open arms. It is not, this is very important that she says, it is not the love the sinner and hate the sin. It's not that. Shouldn't have that. That's still showing that you love the person, I'll accept him because that's his freedom, his right, but I don't like what he's doing. I don't like him having the relationship. She says, if you and I still think that way and feel that way, she says, then you and I still do not accept the message in 2018, the Midnight Cry message. We still haven't accepted the message of 2019 and all the messages of the Midnight Cry. She continues, says, how awful is that for them to know that they are sinning when they are fundamentally born with that trait. Who they are, understanding that means that love is not love. The love we say that we love them because they are the sin and that concept, which says that's not true love. LGBTQ are not distorted, defective, sick, or evil. It says, and then she continues, says, the message is formalized. Is there any new message in the harvest? Remember, it's around that period, harvest time of the priest. Harvest, no, we all agree to that in 2018, then really agree to it in 2019. And he says, if people in this movement do not accept gay marriage or see it as immorality, then they still didn't accept and understand the message in 2018, because it is the same message, the same author. And we need to, if we still have, I know, many in this movement are still grappling and fighting whether to what's to accept and do not accept into this gay marriage. Many of us say yes, but yet our mind still has something going against and seeing that it's not right. We need to understand this. We need to understand history. We need to really look at Bible verses. We need to really, all these Bible verses that they use, it's out of context. It does not go with gay marriage and homosexuality, the true meaning or definition that we know what it is right now. It's abuse. That was the sin and the practices that they were doing. And that abuse, God does not like it. And Elder Tess put it, and she says, what established it all and what's amazing? And she went referred to the civil rights, second wave feminism, and Stonewall, and she said this. Civil rights. God chose Elder Pomida as a representative of civil rights. Second wave feminism, God chose Elder Tess as a representative or a parable of feminism. And then she mentioned Daniel. It represents Stonewall. And she said it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that Daniel was chosen to preach at the formalization of the Midnight Cry, to preach in Arkansas, is it the Lamb? I don't know which place Jeff said it, because they did not allow women to, it was not their custom to allow women to preach on the Sabbath. So they ignored Elder Tess, but they chose someone who is an LGBTQ. And then she says those three just represents what the movement stands for, and God is just trying to establish what the movement is standing for. And I hope and pray that this will help us understand with all these Bible verses and how it's been used out of context. We need to really understand these things very well. And hope and pray that this has helped us and it could help us in establishing ourselves and supporting our fellow movement members, our fellow human beings who does gay marriage and are homosexual. With those words, I'd like us to kneel and bow our heads, if you're able to, and let's close with a word of prayer. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for the message that you've given us. We thank you for your messenger. We thank you for the messages that you've shown us today and help us to establish ourselves even more and accept the LGBTQ community, accept our fellow friends, and family members who are in this community, Lord, that we may receive them with an open mind and with understanding and open arms, and that we may not look at them just being as a sinner, loving the sinner and hating the sin that they do. We ask the Lord to please be with your people. May you help us individually to practice the messages that you've given us. Be with us this day, be with the next presenter. May you continue to bless us and feed us with the heavenly manna from above, that we may be fed spiritually, that we may establish ourselves in your movement, in the messages of the Midnight Cry. Thank you so much for answering our prayers. In Jesus' name we pray.